You know that moment when someone asks what you think, and you answer, but somehow without really answering. You tilt your head, soften your words, add a little, but I could be wrong, maybe even smile while doing it. Your opinion arrives wrapped in bubble wrap, safe, flexible, hard to grab onto. Maybe you do this. Maybe you notice it in others. Or maybe you're suddenly realizing you never say exactly what you think, at least not all the way. This isn't indecision. It's not people-pleasing in the obvious sense, and it's definitely not a lack of intelligence or conviction. There's a quiet psychology behind people who keep their opinions soft on purpose, and once you see it, you start noticing it everywhere, in meetings, in friendships, online, even in yourself. So let's talk about the minds that speak gently, hedge deliberately, and leave the door open even when they know what they believe, and why, for them, certainty can feel oddly dangerous. Picture a group conversation. Someone throws out a strong opinion. Politics, relationships, career advice, doesn't matter. The room tightens a little. People pick sides, voices sharpen. Then there's you. You step in calmly. Well, I see both sides. I don't totally disagree, but it probably depends on the situation. You're not lying. You do see both sides, but you're also doing something else, lowering the emotional temperature of the room. This first type keeps opinions soft because they're highly attuned to social friction, not conflict avoidant in a fearful way, more like conflict aware. They can sense when a conversation is about to harden into something brittle, and instinctively, they act like social shock absorbers. Psychologically, these people often grew up learning that strong opinions change group dynamics. Maybe they watched arguments escalate fast. Maybe harmony was fragile. Or maybe they just noticed early on that once you take a firm stance, people start reacting to you, not listening to you. So they learned a strategy. Stay fluid. Stay interpretable. Keep room to maneuver. Soft opinions let them stay connected to multiple people at once. They can talk to the idealist and the realist, the optimist and the cynic. They're rarely against anyone, just gently adjacent. If this is you, you might recognize the subtle exhaustion that comes with it. You're often the bridge, the translator, the one smoothing edges. And sometimes you wonder what it would feel like to just drop a solid opinion on the table and walk away. Then there's another version of soft opinion people, and this one is quieter, more internal. Imagine being asked your stance and feeling a strange resistance rise up, not because you don't know what you think, but because once you say it out loud, it feels like you're locking yourself into a version of yourself. This type keeps opinions soft because they experience identity as something fluid, evolving, unfinished. A firm opinion feels like a snapshot taken too early. Psychologically, these people tend to think in layers and timelines. They're aware that what feels true today might feel incomplete tomorrow. They've changed their minds before, and not in a shallow way, in a deep, perspective-shifting way. So instead of saying, "This is what I believe," they say, "This is where I'm at right now." Softness becomes intellectual humility, a way of honoring complexity, a refusal to pretend that certainty is permanent. If you're like this, you might get subtly frustrated with people who sound too sure, not because they're wrong, but because they seem unaware of how provisional most beliefs actually are. You don't want to be trapped by past opinions. You want room to grow, revise, contradict yourself without apology. And keeping your opinions soft gives you that freedom. But here's the twist. Other people don't always read this as depth. Sometimes they read it as vagueness or a lack of conviction, which can feel unfair. Then there's the person who keeps opinions soft as a form of quiet power. This one is easy to miss. Picture someone who rarely states their view outright, but when they do speak, everyone leans in. They ask questions instead of making declarations. They nudge conversations rather than dominating them. This is strategic softness. Psychologically, these people understand something subtle. The person who states the strongest opinion often loses flexibility. Once you declare, you defend. Once you defend, you're predictable. Soft opinions let them stay adaptive. They can adjust based on new information. They can influence without being pinned down. They can let others arrive at conclusions that just happen to align with theirs. This isn't manipulation, it's awareness of social dynamics.
They know that people resist being told what to think, but love thinking they arrived there themselves. If this resonates, you might notice that you prefer planting seeds over drawing lines. You're comfortable letting silence do some of the work. You don't rush to fill gaps with certainty. And honestly, in many environments, workplaces, negotiations, creative teams, this makes you surprisingly effective. But it also means people rarely quote you, rarely attribute ideas to you. Your influence is felt more than it's named. Then there's a more tender profile. Some people keep their opinions soft because they associate strong opinions with rejection, not consciously, not dramatically, just quietly. Maybe earlier in life, having a clear stance led to being misunderstood, dismissed, or labeled. Maybe speaking too firmly invited debate when they were actually looking for understanding. So the nervous system learned, soften the edges. Psychologically, this is less about fear and more about protection. A soft opinion is easier to take back, easier to reframe, easier to survive if it's not received well. You might recognize this if you often add disclaimers. I'm not an expert. This might sound weird. I could be totally off. These phrases aren't about accuracy. They're emotional airbags. And here's the thing. People like this are often deeply thoughtful. They've just learned to present their thoughts gently, like offering something fragile instead of throwing it into the room. The downside? Over time, they might start underestimating the value of their own perspective. They become translators of other people's ideas, while their own stay half hidden. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Not all soft opinions are the same, but they share a common thread. They resist finality. In a world that rewards hot takes, certainty, and clean answers, these minds operate differently. They're comfortable in the in-between. They notice nuance. They sense that most human questions don't have a single stable answer, so they speak accordingly. And maybe you felt this tension. People asking you to just say what you think, while you're thinking, I am. This is just how I think. Soft opinions aren't a lack of depth. They're often the result of too much depth, too many angles, contexts, and possibilities being held at once. But here's the shadow side. If you always keep your opinions soft, you might start feeling invisible, overlooked, misread as passive when you're actually processing more than most. You might notice that people with louder, firmer views get more attention, even when their thinking is less nuanced. And that can lead to a quiet question forming inside. Is my way of thinking valued here? That's not a small question, because the goal isn't to harden your opinions just to fit in. It's to recognize when softness is a choice and when it's a reflex that no longer serves you. Some situations call for clarity. Some relationships require you to be more solid, not aggressive, not rigid, just clear. And interestingly, people who are capable of soft opinions often have the strongest ones underneath. They just choose when and how to reveal them. So here's something to sit with. Do you keep your opinions soft because you're open-minded, or because you're protecting something? Because you value harmony, or because you've learned certainty has a cost? Because you're strategic, or because you're cautious? None of these answers are wrong, but becoming aware of which one drives you changes how you show up. And maybe the real skill isn't hardening your opinions, but learning when to let them land with weight. So I'll leave you with this. When was the last time you said exactly what you thought without cushioning it? And when was the last time your softness helped you see something others missed? If this landed somewhere familiar, you're not alone. These quiet patterns tend to hide in plain sight. And if you're curious about more of them, the subtle habits, the inner strategies, the psychology of people who don't quite fit the loud mold, you know where to find this channel. Which part of this felt like you?